The team sheets are out. One team is trying to continue their momentum. The other is trying to refine their confidence. And one coach is really playing for survival. I cover all the details now, guys. Let's roll that intro. Kia ora everyone, my name's Zach, I love rugby, welcome back to Hakatime Rugby. Okay guys, as I mentioned, the team sheets are in, and here they are. Before we get into the ins and the outs, I might just touch on the weird delay that we had in naming of the team sheets. 2 days earlier, the Springboks had named their squad, and 2 days later, obviously today, the All Blacks have named their squad. I've read different comments online with people saying it's showing a bit of arrogance from the All Blacks. I actually think it's showing extreme confidence from the Springboks. In this case, Springboks seem to have named their squad earlier, which is a masterstroke really from their coaches. And I think ultimately what they're signaling is that they are very clear on the team that they are going to present, and they are confident in their ability to present well in this match. So I actually think it's more a confidence-building exercise from the Springboks than it is a negative on the All Blacks for delaying or being perceived to delay the announcement of their team sheet. So, looking at the Springboks first, you would have to say a relatively settled squad. Obviously, this team knows exactly what they're trying to get out of games, exactly how they're going to play, and their model or the framework of their team seems to be quite consistent, between test matches, and it's certainly the case here. So they've gone with the 6-8, 6-2 split, I should say, off the bench. Obviously, a forward-dominated game plan here, and the inclusion of Malcolm Marx to start rather than come in off the bench, I think is more a statement of intent and a focus on the breakdown. Malcolm Marx brings physicality, he brings great work at the breakdown, and obviously just a bit of mobility around the field as well. So I think that his inclusion here is really a statement that they are going to target the breakdown as well as the other areas of strength that the Springboks typically have at set piece and in the forwards in particular. To the rest, so obviously Faf de Klerk gets the call up to return. So I think, in hearing some of Nina Bar's comments, they just see him as a better fit against the All Blacks rather than Hendricks this time around. So Faf de Klerk comes in. Handré Pollard obviously settled in that 9-10 combination. And probably the call out there from the back three, Cheslin Colby unavailable for selection, obviously. So it is somewhat of a new look, although Damian Williamson has had his chances, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him in action. I think both teams have real X-factor with the inclusion of Williamson. Obviously, the great work that we've seen from Dialende and Lucanio Arm there in the midfield. It's going to be a great matchup. Now, when I look at the reserves themselves, so again, quite a settled lineup. We know that we're going to see the bomb squad, in action at some point, as in roll in those changes around the 55-minute mark to really press the advantage there in the forwards. A strategy that worked extremely well for the Springboks in the Rugby World Cup. And Willie Leroux reprises his role now as a 23, which I think is great inclusion for him. Obviously, he's a player that can play anywhere, most of the back line. So just an out-and-out footballer. And I think, his new role as a 23 really suits his skill set, especially when you've got X-Factor players like Willemse that should be starting or at least eating the majority of the minutes there for the Springboks. To the All Blacks, and I mentioned it at the start of the video, Ian Foster is playing for his career. I did mention in one of my podcasts recently that Mark Robinson, CEO of New Zealand Rugby Union, came out and said that Ian Foster has been retained for the tour against the Springboks. That is a bold statement and indicates to me that he really has two games. He has this first game in South Africa and the second game in South Africa to prove that the strategy that he's trying to implement is going to be effective. And I think really you're running out of time to make a lot of changes. So I'd be very surprised if the All Blacks were to lose both games in South Africa if they retained Ian Foster. This is it for him, in my opinion. And the cogs have already started to be put in place to favour an appointment of Scott Robertson should Ian Foster fail in his task in South Africa. So to look at the squad that he has presented to really save his career as an All Blacks coach, the first big change, obviously, is Samisoni Tokeaho has been included, and Cody Taylor has been dropped from the team, which is quite a bold statement, but I think it's also an important statement to make. Game 3, he reserved one of his poorest games, I thought, in an All Blacks jersey for that Game 3 series decider against Ireland. There were a lot of line-out throws that were either not straight or overthrown. His general work around the track as well, not up to his usual high standard. a lot of players were having handling errors, but he seemed to be included in that list of players that were really struggling to keep hold of the ball and coming up with errors consistently. So he's paid the price for that ultimately. And in comes Toke Aho. I think the younger, fresher, more physical Toke Aho is a better option for this game. So I was glad to see him included. Angus Ta'avao comes in. Obviously, he served his suspension and now he will front up here. It is a relatively inexperienced front row. We know that. So George Bauer there at the 1, Angus Ta'avao here. And off the bench, we've got Ethan de Groot and Tyrell Lomax, both relatively inexperienced, but I'm really looking forward to seeing Ethan de Groot get back into the fold and start building his campaign towards the Rugby World Cup. In my opinion, he should be there. He should have been there against Ireland, but it's great to see him there now. Scott Barrett and Sam Whitelock have been retained as locks. Relatively settled partnership, obviously, with Brodie Retallick out. Unavailable for this one. And to the back three, they've gone with Akira Ioane, Sam Cane, as we expected there, and captain, and Ardie Savea. Aaron Smith, Beauden Barrett, long-time combination, obviously. I was in favour of Richie Mo'unga being the sort of main playmaking option and starting against Ireland. Obviously, they went with Barrett. But in this matchup against the Springboks, I actually think Beauden Barrett is the better fit. So glad to see him there. I think his running game, obviously his ability to distribute the ball is there as well. Bit of a work in progress in the kicking game as well. But I do think his skill set matches up better against the Springboks. The centre pairing, David Habili, Riku Ioane, retained obviously from the Irish series. I still think it's worth persevering with both. David Havili gives you options of more of a playmaker or an additional playmaker in the squad, so that's great. And then the back three, Caleb Clark returns with Will Jordan, the X-Factor, on one wing, and Geordie Barrett, seen as stability under the high ball at the back. So I think the back line looks pretty good to me for a Springbok-specific matchup, even if this team overall didn't go too well against Ireland. I just think styles make fights. And these seem to be the right horses for this course, I guess, against the Springboks. To the bench, I touched on Ethan de Groot and Tyrell Lomax, so Dane Coles is here off the bench. And he brings a little bit more fire, I guess, which should help in what will be very physical exchanges there against the South Africans. Tupou Vai there as replacement lock. Shannon Frizzell as cover for the loose forward trio. Now, a lot was made about Dalton Papali'i being dropped. I think, given the makeup of the loose forward trio, you've essentially got two number 7s. Obviously, Ardie Savea can play 7 or 8 quite interchangeably. Sam Cane is a 7. So, introducing a third 7, Dalton Papali'i off the bench, I don't think was the right makeup. So, I'm glad they've gone with a bit more physicality from Shannon Frizzell. And then Finlay Christie retained here at replacement 9. Mo'unga and Quinn Tupai there at the back. So, a few changes, but I guess when I assess this All Blacks team, I actually think that while they didn't present too well against Ireland, they're a much better selection specifically for the Springbok style of play. So now that we've looked at the team sheets, let's preview the match, some of the key areas that will be a focus for both teams, and where I think the match will ultimately be won or lost. First thing, which is well publicised and well covered, is obviously the forward set-piece strength from the Springboks. As I mentioned, the selection of Malcolm Marx, I think, is a statement of intent at the breakdown. So I expect that to be highly competitive. I expect the Springboks to really target areas of the breakdown that they can turn the ball or win quick ball, much like Ireland did. And on the other side, the All Blacks seem to have elected a bit more for, obviously, those names that they're familiar with, but a bit more mobility around the track. So it looks to me like, at the top of the show, I said that that Foster is really playing for his career. He is sticking to this view of and mentality of a bit more speed and ball playing ability in the forwards in particular. So it's going to be interesting how, what comes out on top ultimately. Is it the power and obviously the coaching of the Springboks versus the X factor and the mobility of the All Blacks and the forwards? That's going to be a fascinating matchup. To the back lines, both relatively experienced. Obviously, the Springboks, we're very clear on how they play and will play in this game. And from the All Blacks perspective, they're trying to rebuild confidence. I'm still not clear on what style they're trying to play, because when we look at what they presented in the first half of Game 3 against Ireland, it was more of a kick-first type mentality, play for field position, rather than what we used to from the All Blacks and is part of the All Blacks DNA, which is to attack when given the opportunity to do so. So it's going to be fascinating to me which All Blacks team shows up to play here and what style of play they will play, because they did look like somewhat of a confused team in terms of their strategy and approach. And Ian Foster's had a little bit more time to work with this team now to try and refine their approach and get things right. So it's going to be fascinating watching, guys. As I mentioned, underpinning all of this is the fact that Ian Foster is really playing for his career as All Blacks head coach. Who do I ultimately think will win? It's very difficult to say whether or not the power of South Africa and the game management of South Africa will beat the X factor of the All Blacks. If the All Blacks can get organised, then they can certainly win this, but you would have to say all factors are pointing towards the Springboks right now, coming off a bit of momentum with that series win against Wales, obviously having strength in the forwards and set piece where the All Blacks have lacked. But as I say, hopefully the extra time has worked well for the All Blacks to try and refine this strategy that Foster has said that he is accountable for. And, prediction aside, let's hope for a fantastic match. I just think all matches between the All Blacks and the Springboks are fantastic contests, and I'm looking forward to more of the same here as well. So, good luck to both teams. Enjoy the rugby, everyone. We still have what is an old school style tour here, so a lot to look forward to in this game and the next game, and some fascinating talking points to come out of this, which I'll cover after the match right here on Hakatime Rugby. Stick with me, guys. I'll see you all back here soon.